Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on very important topic, operational technology security. My name is Cashman. I'm the EMEA field CTO based out of the Netherlands, and I'm joined today by an industry expert, Rob.
Great, thanks, Heimo. I'm Rob Labbé. I'm the CISO-in-Residence and CEO of the Mining and Metals ISAC, which is the industry ISAC for the mining and metals sector globally.
Awesome. And in my role, I focus a lot on operational technology security issues for our customers and partners. And I think this is a very important area for, I'll say in cybersecurity, but really it's bigger. It's even bigger than that. It kind of expands out into other areas like resilience and national resilience. But what I'd like to do, Rob, is let's use this session to sort of identify some of the key, we'll say, macro challenges that you see and that we're seeing in other areas, and then we'll see how it goes from there. I think the first thing that I see when I talk to organizations about their OT security, and they sort of go like this because it seems to be hard, and I'm wondering, from your experience, what makes it so different, say, or so hard versus, say, IT security, for example.
I think what makes it tough, and I think what makes it tough for IT security people coming in is, while the technology, at least the front end, looks the same. There's a lot of Windows, there's a lot of TCP/IP. We know what to do with that. The priorities of the environment are very different. I remember moving into OT from IT, and thanks to the CISP people, I got the CIA triad beaten in my head, right? When I got to OT, it was very different. It was subtle, but the impact was big, where it's AIC as opposed to CIA, all wrapped in a blanket of S for safety.
Right. Safety.
And so when you flip those letters, because in IT security, CIA isn't just the mnemonic, it's actually order of priority for most of us in IT. Mm-hmm. And we'll sacrifice the one at the end, the availability to maintain confidentiality and integrity, right? However, in OT, it's very different. Availability is king and what has to come first. Think about if you're running a power grid, getting electricity to hospitals is actually number one.
Right.
If you're running a hospital, making sure the CT scanner works is number one. Mm-hmm. And all of that in my industry in particular, being mining, which is a very dangerous industry, making sure people stay safe and people go home safe and healthy is what wraps all of that up.
Those cultural differences, do you think it's then difficult for, we'll say, the IT security team to start managing or start thinking about solutions for the OT side? Is that too broad a chasm, or is it better to have OT specific security professionals?
I think it's interesting. I think it's not too broad of a chasm. I think, though, it's one that has to be approached differently. Okay. It's one that has to be approached. I often tell my teams and the CISOs I work with, cybersecurity and OT is done at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
That's your gate. And so it means you've got to show up. It's a ministry of presence. Mm-hmm. You've got to understand the environment and show that and then rethink all your controls. It's too broad of a chasm if you take your IT controls and go, well, they've worked well for me for the last 20 years of my career here. We'll just slap them in there. They can't go wrong. Yeah. And then your endpoint solution auto contains a critical safety system. And now what? Yeah. Right? Or it's Patch Tuesday, and you apply the patch and reboot critical systems and stop production and turn off electricity to half the Northeast Seaboard, right? So it really is a matter of thinking through your controls, and when you switch that assumption that confidentiality and integrity come first to availability come first, does that control make sense? And how do you apply that into OT?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I can imagine scenarios where you're talking to the IT security side and it's all about automation, right? Getting faster.
Yeah.
And then you go over to the OT side and it's the opposite, like you said, safety first. And what I see a lot from the organizations that I deal with is just that, a lot more due diligence when deploying a solution, a lot more consideration into, is it validated? The configuration becomes extremely important. Change management becomes super important. And then the life cycle of that solution becomes super important as well, because it has to have a longer lifespan. So those are all big differences, I think.
I think the other one is lifespan. I didn't mention that one, but you sort of touched on it. Is depending on the OT area, in mining, a lot of the base OT equipment is 25, 30 years old.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's not done yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we're merging in a lot of cases in OT, 15, 20-year-old equipment, sometimes cases, even 10-year-old equipment with, cloud-based AI.
Yeah.
It'll be fine, I'm sure. Right?
I like that. I'm sure, no problem.
But, we're using technology that was designed and developed, decades ago, mm-hmm. where it's not that the designers got it wrong. It's that, cloud AI 20 years ago wasn't even a thought.
Yeah.
Not even, it wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't even a thought.
It wasn't
right?
at all.
Yeah, if we think, you and I are old, when we think back when we started a career, when we talk about cloud AI, right? Now, the cloud was the thing that rained on you every day, right? So it was a matter of, we're figuring out how to do that. And that's where the challenge and the fun is in OT.
It is, and I do think it is a challenge, but also is very interesting, because it's certainly one of those critical areas of a business that if it, one thing I always notice is when you're talking to IT security and you want to talk about let's say the business value, the impact, we know it's there, right? But sometimes it becomes a little hard to put an exact dollar amount on the downtime, the cost avoidance. That's a totally different situation on the OT side. I could speak to an organization, the organization, part of the organization that's doing OT security or OT management, and if I asked that very same question, boom, they would be able to give me an exact answer in the millions of dollars or whatever it might be. And that's totally different. I guess have you seen that same sort of differential in risk appetite, or in the impact?
In a way, it's clear, right? In OT, if a system goes down and brings an operation down, it's very easy to measure the impact of that system being down in dollars per minute.
Yeah.
As a unit. Mm-hmm. Where that gets interesting in risk, though, and again, this is the spot where I think IT security people need to transition their thinking. We then flip to a board that is measuring outage in dollars, or production in dollars per hour.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or tons per hour and dollars per tons, but mm-hmm. the connection is very close to risk is red and scary and NIST score of 3.2, and we're going to get it to a 3.4, and heaven forbid we slip to a 2.9. Yeah. Right? We're trying to communicate with OT professionals that are used to dollars and safety, dollars and lives and injuries, in these esoteric measures to convey risk that mean nothing to anybody but us.
Right.
And it's like showing up in a rural town in some other country and speaking English louder and slower and hoping it works. Right? It's just not getting there.
Yeah. Well, in your experience, Rob, what would you, in order to sort of bridge those cultural divides and understandings, what were some recommendations if you're in IT security today and you need to take, because this is happening, right, in many organizations where the OT part is becoming part of enterprise security planning, and that means there's going to be more of these cultural divides identified, and OT security professionals, if they're not there, have to be developed, and IT security, if they don't have a practice or understanding, they have to be trained. And even we didn't even speak about the manufacturers of those equipment, because I think that has a big impact here. There's really a triumvirate, the vendors that make the equipment, because they're responsible for it and they validate solutions. They're part of the solution. The OT security teams, and then you have your IT security teams. What's the best way to bring those together and for everybody to get a common understanding in the organizational risk?
I think it starts with coming together.
Okay.
Literally,
Makes sense.
like in a room,
Yeah.
physically. And I think, and then it boils down to objectives.
Okay.
If the OT security area, your OT area's objectives are measured in, I'll use mining for example, number of tons produced and the cost of those tons, then, and the IT security team or the people securing it are measured in things like NIST score and elimination of incidents and things like that, the connection is actually set up to be in conflict.
Okay.
Right? If you think about it, the fastest way to get a higher NIST score is to build consistency across everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you ever try to encrypt all traffic inside of a manufacturing plant because your policy says all data in motion is encrypted everywhere, and all means all, if that's your policy, you're going to have a nightmare on the other side.
Right.
Right. If your objectives are to help optimize production, well, that's different now. You're looking at what matters most in that space. And so I think number one is objectives have to be in alignment. I sat down 3 months ago with a security team, and I realized the easiest way for that security team to make their objectives is to shut down all of the plants.
That's not good. That's not going to go over too well with the leadership and the board.
Right, and because if you look at security objectives, no incidents. Well, you turn it off, you're going to knock that out of the ballpark. Right, you're going to meet your budget spend, and you're going to be rock solid consistent now because you won't have the inconsistencies of the plants. Your NIST score is going to go way up.
Yeah.
Right, you're going to knock your objectives out of the ballpark. You're just not going to have a company anymore. And we've got to get to that. It's the next iteration of that. The most secure computer, the only secure computer is the one encased in concrete at the bottom of the ocean. That we used to say way back when. But we have to get those objectives in alignment. I think that's where it has to start, is those shared objectives and shared success.
I love the way you put that. It's really concise, first off, and it's awesome, because what I've seen in some of I'd say the leading companies in OT security that I've dealt with, right, from my perspective, that's the language difference that I've noticed in those companies, right? The more mature ones, the ones that really take it, have been doing it for a while, understand it. When I'm speaking to the security leaders in those companies and organizations, they are talking about how they make the plant operator easier, make it simpler for him, put more data in front of him so they can make simple decisions, so that they can continue operating effectively. It was all about the plants, the remote operators, the business side, the manufacturing systems, the distribution systems, all about making them successful and having to meet compliance, right? But understanding that there's different challenges out there, and how can the security team make it easier for them to achieve what they need to do to be compliant, to be secure, but also to make it easier for them, right? And make it more simple, so they can get back and understand. Let's say they can focus in on safety, they can focus in on availability versus having to quickly do this task or not. I've seen that major difference in language, right, in communication.
Right, and it's not just a shift in language. It starts with a shift in language, because language is easy to change.
Yeah.
It's the shift in attitude, where, and I'm sure, Mo, you said this in your past, and I know I have, security is everybody's responsibility.
Yeah.
And everybody should be thinking about security all the time. Right? Well, no, actually, in OT. you've got some people doing really dangerous things. I want them thinking about how they make sure they go home to their families, not that link.
Yeah.
Right? I want them thinking about, and I had a blaster. I was in a security, we were doing a security awareness thing, and I had a blaster, and I was talking about how, you really need to think about security all the time. And he said, no, Rob, I'm not.
Yeah.
He says, no, I'm thinking about how I make sure my team gets home safe with all of their appendages all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not changing that for you. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what really drove home that thought of, wait a second, no, he shouldn't be asked to change that. I need to make sure him doing his job and making the mistakes that humans make, because humans are reliably good at human.
Yeah. Yeah.
That nothing happens that puts those people at risk.
Yeah.
I need to share that goal. He doesn't need to share mine.
Understood. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's that aha moment in that session was really key. That was probably about 8-9 years ago. That really shifted that thinking for me.
That's really interesting, and that's a great advice for all the organizations out there that have to take this on now, starting at those levels, the context, having shared goals, understanding the safety versus safety and availability versus confidentiality and integrity, the priorities there, and how important that is. Because I think you can say it, right, but you obviously are living it. You've lived it. The people that you've worked with and that story that you just gave were living it, right? They're on the front lines, so to speak. It's almost like being in the military. They're on the front lines. Safety first, right? And I was in the military, and that was really, we'll say, built into us. Safety first when it comes to soldiers and things, and you have to have that mindset. And I do think there's a good corollary there between mission security, let's just say, in between the OT and the defense world. But another thing I've heard you say, more towards the leadership changes that need to occur. First off, I've seen some stats that, and I even heard from some customers now that the IT CISO now has responsibility across the OT environment. I think it's right for the organization to have a consistent strategy there, or a combined strategy. Let's say consistency in technology might not be right, but a combined strategy. But you had some interesting, we'll say, philosophies on that side, where when that's coming together, what would you say to a CISO? Is it IT first or OT first?
Always OT first. Always OT first.
Always OT first.
Right, and and it sort of comes from, number one, if you're an OT heavy company, likely 80-90% of your revenue, your risk, your people are in the OT space. That's where all your money comes from. That's where all your safety risks are. If that stops, your company is no longer a going concern. That should be what's first. Like, just from a pure stack rank importance logic perspective, that has to be first. I still remember, 10, 12 years ago, it was common for the CISOs in mining not to have responsibility for OT at all. I'm thinking, you're trying to secure a full company by focusing on the 10%, smallest 10%. Let me know how that works for you, right? It's right. So the 80 or 90% has to come first, anyways. Right. And the reality is, and we've sort of seen that in incidents where mining companies that have managed that well have had crippling incidents from scattered spider and the like, lost all their back end IT systems for a few weeks, but still produced and didn't lose a pound of production. Sure, they were a month or two late in invoicing for it, but that can wait. That's okay, right? Some accountants might not think that's okay, but that's okay, right? As long as we can keep producing safely, we still have a going concern. Whereas mining companies who have been unsuccessful in that and had to shut down production, we've seen go out of business, go bankrupt, be bought at a fire sale price by a larger competitor. Like, we've seen all of those company destroying outcomes when you don't do that. So it really boils down to that simple, and the reason is that simple as well. And I've said this before, I say this to my teams all the time is, hey, if you make a mistake on the corporate side and you lose a few $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
I'll happily go to the CFO and go, oops, my bad.
A few
Right?
$1 million is an oops.
A couple $1 million, if it's a $15 billion company, is an oops.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right? Depending on
Yeah.
scale. However, you don't get to say, oops, my bad at a funeral.
That's true. Yeah.
You never get to, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
your priority always has to be where you don't get to say, oops, my bad.
Yeah. Do you think there's a, because with that mindset, well, if you're a CISO coming from the IT side of things, your mindset has been in a certain, on the other side, let's just say, for so many, maybe even decades. What's the best, other than the things that we talked about, understanding the context and getting that safety mindset? Is there something you've seen as sort of the need for those CISOs to understand? What's the next thing they need to understand, right? It's not just training, it's got to be something else, I would believe. I mean, training is part of it, right? But
So, I mean, training's part of it, learning's part of it, and building the right team around you is part of it. When I shifted into OT, the first thing I did is, found a guy somewhere in the business that's forgotten more about OT than I still have ever learned, and stuck him right next to me.
Gotcha. Getting the expertise
right?
in your team, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, get that human next to you. And then for me, it's spending a lot of time at sites.
Okay.
Going, getting a pair of steel-toed boots and a pair of safety glasses and a hard hat and showing up. And, riding with the haul truck driver and sitting with the blasters and, sitting in the control room at site, what they're stressed about. And it's just, sometimes there's no substitute for hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, don't fly in on a junket, a dog and pony show and show up for an hour, but show up for weeks.
Gotcha. Get out there, get dirty, understand the day-to-day challenges that
get dirty, understand understand what will stop each individual from going home that night.
Yeah. Okay.
And understand what he's worried about, and understand what will cause, if you're in the electricity sector, the power to go out for millions of people.
Yeah.
Like, understand those things and understand the process and then look for ways you can use your superpowers in cybersecurity to make that better.
Wow.
10 years as a CISO of a mining company, I did 0 security projects at site. I did tons of operational improvement projects and tons of continuous improvement enablement projects and tons of those projects that maintenance optimization projects. Yeah. They all had happy security side effects, right? If you're going to improve maintenance, well, if you don't have a good asset inventory, it's hard to maintain it. Well, that's a handy thing for cyber too. But I didn't do it for me. I did it for them.
Right.
I just paid for it. Right? It really is, you've got to see them, they've got to see you focused on them.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. That's great. I mean, I think that's great context and some great advice, for organizations out there that are first getting into it, or even ones that have been faced with it for several years and maybe are struggling with getting it right. So I think the context is important, the focus on availability and safety as your mindset becomes important, and that last piece there, understanding that it needs to be done for them because they're the ones that are most at risk. That's where the critical part of the business is. I think that's some great advice for organizations listening in. And maybe one last piece here, which is in dealing with, because you have different suppliers on the IT side than you do on the OT side. And so yes. The CISOs are very familiar with dealing with the Microsofts and even cybersecurity companies. But when it comes to the other side, they've got different vendors. And is there any advice that you would give for vendor management in that sense and supplier management? What do you see as challenges and successes there?
I think it becomes your right sizing. What we do have differences, we're starting to see the same, right?
Yeah.
We're starting to see a lot, especially in cybersecurity, a lot of cybersecurity companies going, oh, we can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
We run on Windows, it's Windows over there, we can do that too, put us there too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so with varying degrees of success or truth to that, we can do it too claim. But I think it comes down to, in IT world, we typically have a plethora of suppliers
Mm-hmm.
to do whatever it is we need to do, from startups to established companies. And so we've got that, we're spoiled for choice. And we can say, no, actually, if you don't do it my way, I'm going to give my check to somebody else who's going to do it the way I need it done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Don't do it my way, no more money. You can say that.
Mm-hmm.
In OT, often it's very specialized small vendors. And so you've got a small niche engineering firm that's, 5 guys and a dog
Mm-hmm.
that just happen to be the world's greatest experts at X or produce a Y component, and they're the only ones on the planet who do it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now vendor management is very different because your leverage to have them do things differently or otherwise is now different.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Now it's, you can't say, I don't like the way you're handling my data. If you don't fix it, you're not going to get a contract renewal.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know and you know that, okay, good luck then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so now it becomes actually a discussion of understanding their motivations and goals, and how can you communicate the security improvements you want to see with them in a way that actually benefits them, not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You might be encouraging to do the right thing for the wrong reasons, and I've long since gotten past caring about the reasons why people do the right thing, as long as they do the right thing. But finding the thing that resonates with those vendors, it's a much deeper relationship. You can't just say, I'm the customer, I've got the checkbook.
Right.
You're going to do it my way. The power relationship flips in OT very often.
It does. I've seen that. I've seen that happening, and I think those are some of the key different challenges that the security teams are going to face when they start to take on that part of the business and start to manage it. And I think you've provided some great lessons learned for those organizations throughout this session. And it's actually a good tee up into the next session we're going to do, which is going to get into more of some of the solutions that are appropriate for the OT side. But that's not for this one. In this one, we just wanted to identify the problem, and there's cultural differences, there's risk appetite differences, there's vendor management differences, and all of that has to be understood at the leadership level for organizations to be more resilient. And
Absolutely.
I think with that, Rob, thank you so much. Great insights. Really appreciate your time, and it's great talking to you again. And hopefully we'll do a couple more of these sessions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you, Rob.